The sheer explosive power of 400 Thunder top bikes have always been a great attraction for drag racing fans. Incredibly strong and yet amazingly delicate at the same time, it's a very fine line between pleasure and pain on these monsters. These riders all know how much of a struggle it is to get that ultimate pass and at the end of the night be left standing with the trophy and be the last one left smiling. When 400 Thunder made its debut at Sydney Dragway, Perth's Mark Drew was the last man standing at the end of the night. Then in Perth, he backed up the Sydney win with a win on his home turf. Oh, wow! Wow, Chris Porter. In round 3, the tables turn. Oh, only 0.02 of a second in it at the start line. Mark Drew over near the wall. He's had to get out of it and opens the door for Chris Porter. Chris Porter takes it a 6-7-0. In round 4, the points leader Mark Drew went down to Chris Matheson, who took his first shot at celebrating for season 2016. Matheson takes the win after only making the B final last night. He takes out the win in the A final here tonight and puts an exclamation point on it. So coming into this event, Mark Drew is leading the points on 350. Chris Matheson a long way behind, but not out of range yet. 233 for him, and Chris Porter in third. And now we find ourselves here at Willowbank Raceway for the Santos Super 3 Extreme Drag Race. This promises to be a huge event and a pivotal turning point in this championship. With only a handful of rounds left, this is what it's going to come down to this weekend. So qualifying session, the one and only that we have here this weekend, it is running on the 3-round format, which is a little bit different for the top bike guys. We haven't seen a lot of that for them over the last couple of years. Of course, the 3-round format basically meaning that the 2 quickest winners from the first round will go through to the A final. The next 2 quickest winners will go through to the B final. So it's all about getting win lights and running quick times. Now we've got Damien Muscat on screen right now. First time ever riding in a competition event on a top bike. That is an experience and a half, and he's taking on a former national champion in the form of Chris Porter, racing for Fraser Motorcycles and Dunright. The Bad Bones Racing Nitro Harley taking on the newcomer here at Willowbank and riding into the sun. That's not easy. Oh, but how about the bravery from Muscat? Fantastic launch, fantastic run for him, and rolls across the line after an early shut-off for a 6.95. That is a spectacular ride. Chris Porter looked like he had some problems, only an 8.17, and Damien Muscat is taking the deep turn off down there. Let's have a look at the replay. This bike left beautifully, front wheel in the air. It was tracking straight, and there was no hint of backing off for Damien Muscat until it just got to half track. You see him roll out of the throttle, the front wheel touches down. He just got a little bit too close to the centre line. And having a look at Chris Porter, trying to tell exactly what happened, just turned the tyre, blew the tyre off about 100 metres off the start line. Either way, not the way he wants to kick off his weekend, but Damien Muscat, what a way to start his 400 Thunder career. Next pair on track, a little bit different to the big bangers that we just had, the Nitro Harleys. We've got a couple of 4-cylinder motorcycles. That's Steve Badcock on screen, running one of the only nitrous-assisted bikes that we've got in this country, taking on another nitro-fueled machine. But as you can see, very, very different configuration. A multi-cylinder, supercharged combination. That's Gavin Spann racing for Noodlebox. This man is a former national champion in this class, has been riding very, very quick motorcycles in drag racing for upwards of 30 years. He's been around for a long time, a lot of experience, and just about anything that he can face, he has faced it over his career. And Steve Badcock, well, we've seen plenty of him as well. Saw him down in Sydney for the first round of the championship. Probably not his best showing, but looking to redeem that here at Willowbank. Home track for both of these riders. They've just got to note these motorcycles. It takes a very, very special person to sit on top of one, I can tell you. Pretty clean on both sides of the racetrack, and Gavin Spann He rolled out of the throttle a little bit early there, but a 6.88 takes him to the #1 spot. Very nice run. Gets over the centre line in the braking area, but that doesn't matter. The run is complete by then. That doesn't disqualify him, but a 6.88. He'll be pretty happy with that, I would say. Badcock a 7.48. That's also a big step in the right direction for that team. Having a look at the replay, again, it's critical launching these bikes with the front wheel in the air. I know it seems counterproductive when you're sitting at home watching it, but if the front wheel's in the air, that means the back tyre is hooking up. It means it's riding the wheelie bar out there, and it means that, generally speaking, these bikes are on a good run. And then we move on to Chris Matheson, the bike with probably the most potential in this country. Still trying to sort out a new engine combination for Chris Matheson. They've got it in the motorcycle. They've had it in there for probably a couple of race meetings now. They're finally starting to get on top of the tyre smoke problems that they've had. This bike has got a habit of really smoking the tyre hard with all this horsepower, and what they need to do is really find a new clutch setup and a new power delivery setup to actually get all that horsepower down to the ground. And then we have a look at Mr. Consistency on the Perth Harley-Davidson motorcycle on the far side of the racetrack. That is our championship leader, Mark Drew, a man who is renowned for getting this bike to the finish line. He is Mr. Consistency this season, just going rounds, winning races, getting it down the racetrack. That's exactly what you want to do if you want to win championships. Oh! And I put the mockers on him here. Mark Drew with a big flash of flame. That's going to mean some work to do for him, but a 6.55 for Chris Matheson. And still, he rolled out of the throttle very, very early. 289 kilometres per hour says to me that he was out of it way before the finish line. Let's have a look at Mark Drew on the far side of the racetrack. You can see the front wheel comes up and then the rear wheel starts smoking. It comes down, he pedals it once, twice, and a big flash of flame out the side of the motor. That looks to me like he's torched ahead there, and that means plenty of work to do. But Chris Matheson takes the #1 qualifying spot, 6.55. Gavin Spann right in behind him, and the newcomer, Damien Muscat, with a 6.95. 3 bikes in the 6-second zone. This is going to be a good one, especially with Mark Drew in the #6 spot. That means he's going to take on Chris Matheson in the first round. Don't go anywhere. After the break, we'll have all the action from the first round here at Willowbank. It is elimination time now here in Willowbank, the Santos Super 3 Extreme Drag Race, and you'll notice one name that is missing off that ladder. It is Mark Drew, our championship leader, unable to front for this round of racing after that huge explosion that we saw in qualifying. That means that this man and the man that is trying to chase him down in the championship has got one free shot at this racetrack. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to go through to the A final. He needs to run quick times to be able to do that. You've got to remember, it's about win lights. It's also about running the 2 quickest times in elimination. And this is a good one for Chris Matheson. Right across the finish line, and a 6.33. That's a booming run for Chris Matheson, and right back where he wants to be with this motorcycle. He was off the throttle way early as well, still under 300 kilometres per hour, but the front half of this run was absolutely picture perfect. You can see that nice fluffy flame out of the rear, no raw fuel coming out of that engine. That was just absolutely picture perfect right down the centre of the lane until about there, where he rolls out of the throttle, says, yeah, I think I've done enough to make it through. And I would say at a 6.33, he is almost a lock for the A final. And now it's just going to be a matter of who he's going to match up against. Our next pairing is Damien Muscat, the newcomer to the top bike ranks. He's taking on Steve Badcock on the far side of the racetrack. Now, Badcock on this nitrous-assisted motorcycle, it's a little bit different to the other motorcycles that we've got in this class. Doesn't exactly have the same kind of note, the big thumping note of the Harleys or that high-pitched scream that we hear from the nitro-fueled multi-cylinder bikes, but still, nonetheless, he could be a giant killer here. Probably not the quickest bike in the field, but certainly one that could get down any kind of racetrack, and that is going to play into his hands. Whereas Damien Muscat, well, this is a whole new deal for him. This is a racing pairing, an elimination pairing for all intents and purposes. He needs to win, he needs to run quick, and he's a newcomer, not an easy task. Oh, going straight for the centre line. Damien Muscat over in front of Steve Badcock. That could have been very, very scary. Damien Muscat, man, oh man. He gets that bike back into his own lane, but that right there is a big lesson about what these bikes can do. Steve Badcock was just minding his own business there. In fact, it was probably a good thing that that bike spun the tyre off the start line, because if he didn't, he would probably have been side by side with Damien Muscat, and both riders would have been in a world of trouble. You can see Muscat just lays the bike over a little bit. It gets on the frame rail, starts sliding, and by that point, the run is done for both riders, because Badcock can't stay in it because you go up the back of Damien Muscat, and Muscat obviously is over the centre line, so it's instant disqualification for him. But man, oh man, that's an exciting one in this first round. Gavin Spann on the Noodlebox bike. Very, very cool motorcycle, this one, and he's been trying to get a handle on it over the last probably 5 or more years, and it's only in the last 12 months or so that he's really started to make headway with this motorcycle. Really getting it down the racetrack, running consistent 6-second times now. The next thing is about getting win lights and about getting championships. He's a former champion, he knows how to win, he wants to win. So does this man, Chris Porter. Bad Bones Racing motorcycle, racing for Fraser Motorcycles. He's a tough hombre, this one. We've seen him walk away from some big bangs over the years, but he's also run some very quick times over the years. Who will go through to the A final to take on Chris Matheson? Oh, we've got a race on our hands, and Porter takes it right at the death. Rides around the outside of Gavin Spann, 673 to a 673. That's one of the best races I've seen in Top Bike for a long, long time. Gavin Spann, he would have to be kicking himself. He rolled out of the throttle before the finish line, and that just allowed Porter to sneak past by a couple of thousandths of a second. Porter was also first off the start line, so it was probably a little bit more than that, maybe half a bike length by the time we got to the finish line. But that there is what Nitro on 2 wheels is all about. You can see Spann just getting a little bit close to the centre line. He rolled out of the throttle. I don't think he knew Porter was there, and that was enough to take him out of that race. So the A final will see the old sparring partners, Chris Porter and Chris Matheson, taking on each other for that big trophy. And the B final will see Gavin Spann taking on Steve Badcock. Time now for the B final here at the Santos Super 3 Extreme Drag Race here at Willowbank Raceway. And as you can see by the multicoloured lights around, it's a little bit of a different atmosphere at this drag race. It's a bit more of a party atmosphere, and the crowd really gets into it, and it is a big crowd in the house here tonight at Willowbank Raceway. This is the B final. That's Steve Badcock on the starting line, and I bet you he's just hoping for a run where he gets to keep the lane to himself. In that first round of racing, had Damien Muscat come way across in front of him and almost, well, I didn't want to say collide with him, but certainly got over, and it could have been a very, very nasty incident. And in this matchup, he'll be taking on Gavin Spann, who was the fastest of our losers from that first round of racing. And I guess to a certain extent, probably has to count himself a little bit unlucky not to get through. Of course, only lost by the slightest of margins against Chris Porter in that first round of racing. This is for the B final, so it's not for the big trophy, but still plenty of points on offer, and that's important to both riders. Oh, driveline problems, it looks like, for Gavin Spann. And Steve Badcock finally gets it lane to himself, and a very, very nice run right down the centre of the lane. How's a 748 sound? A 748 with a 0. 274 kilometres per hour. Not the quickest run that we've seen this weekend, but still consistency goes a long, long way in drag racing. And unfortunately for Gavin Spann, being quick has just bit him there. I'm not sure what happened. It looked like the bike spun the tyre really, really hard off the start line. He tried to pedal it, but you could see as soon as he rolled back into that throttle, there was nothing there. The bike just stopped driving. I don't know, maybe sheared a drive belt or something like that, but either way, it doesn't matter. Steve Badcock has gone through and taken the victory here in the B final. And it certainly hasn't been Gavin Spann's day so far. Loses by the barest of margins in the first round, and then bike problems in this final. Not the way you want to end your race day, but he's still got a whole nother race day tomorrow. You've got to remember, this is 2 championship days over 2 days here at Willowbank, so it is going to be a big, big weekend. Now we move on to the A final. This one is for the big trophy. It's for the big bag of points, and this one could be pivotal in this championship. Chris Porter, he knows he's got plenty of ground to make up, and Chris Matheson is running second in the championship. He was over 100 points behind Mark Drew coming into this event, but the good news for him, and the bad news for Mark Drew, is that Drew did not make the first round of racing, so he's not going to take away too many this weekend. Who's going to take home the trophy here? Oh, very close to the centre line for Chris Porter, and I think he might have actually tagged it. 6:36 for Chris Matheson. That bike has been on a string all weekend long. They tested it out in qualifying, and then in the first round and the final, they're both running the 6:30s. That's an incredible weekend for those guys so far. But Chris Porter, he was on an absolute tear with that bike as well. A 687, nothing to sneeze at, especially considering he got out of the throttle well before the finish line. Keep your eye on the bike on the right-hand side. You can see the front wheel was in the air. It was just tracking towards the centre line. He had no option but to get out of it.
Yeah, good result. The guys worked really hard. It was very hot and wet, the air, so it's difficult for us on the bike. But we got through. We ran a couple of 30s. We ran a couple of 30s in Perth too. So hopefully we can go a little bit quicker tomorrow. But yeah, it was a good result.
Yeah, we've gone back to back, and there's a possibility we could maybe go for the three-peat tomorrow night.
That'd be nice. We need the points, believe me, we need the points. Unfortunately, Mark, who's leading the championship, he had a grenade in the first one, so he's lost a few points, or he hasn't gained any more, so we're clawing a few back on him, but he'll be out tomorrow and he'll be fighting harder than ever to get away from us again, so we'll be trying.
That's day one in the books, and it's shaken up the championship in a big, big way. We've still got a whole nother day of racing yet to go here at Willowbank, and we'll see it on the other side of this break. Incredible shots off the onboard of Chris Matheson's bike. It's day 2 of the Santos Super 3 Extreme Drag Race here at Willowbank. And I'll tell you what, it's under very, very dark skies here in Queensland. They say it's always sunny in Queensland, but it certainly doesn't look like that today. There is our winner from last night, the man who has been on an absolute missile all weekend long. Chris Matheson is taking on Chris Porter here in the qualifier. This is the compulsory qualifier, the one and only shot that they get at the racetrack before we move into racing this afternoon. Now, although conditions look very, very different to what they did yesterday, these bikes don't require a huge amount of changes heading into this round of racing. There is a little bit more water in the air, the track temp is a little bit lower, but on the whole, they're not going to need wholesale changes to get these bikes down the racetrack. Chris Matheson on another tear with this motorcycle. Again, almost all the way to the finish line there, but a 6:52, that's going to be good enough for the #1 spot for the time being. And we've still got a few bikes left to go in this one and only compulsory qualifier. But a 6:52, that's going to take some beating. There hasn't been anybody else who's gone quicker than that this weekend. What happened to Chris Porter here? The legs went out fairly early in the run. He's still on the pedal, but just got over near the centre line again. I think that was what did it for him. It's just been a repeat performance again for Chris Porter. He keeps getting over near that centre line, something they'll really need to sort out with the setup on that bike before they head into racing this afternoon. And nice, clean flame again for Chris Matheson. They have certainly got this engine combination sorted. They've matched the clutch up to it. They've got this thing on absolute rails at the moment. And Chris Matheson is coming for this championship. If I was Mark Drew, I would be very, very nervous at the moment. Gavin Spann on screen. The Noodle Box motorcycle. This is a tough, tough bike. And Gavin Spann had a very tough day yesterday. Lost by the slimmest of margins. Not really through any fault of his own. It was just a combination of circumstances. He got close to the centre line, rolled out of the throttle just a little bit early to keep it in his own lane, and in doing so, let Chris Porter on through for the win. And he's taking on our B final winner from last night. Steve Badcock, I think he'd be the first to admit they probably didn't think that that was going to happen heading into this event on a bike that is probably the lowest powered of all the motorcycles in this field. But still, it's all about consistency. If you can get a bike from A to B every single round of racing, you'll go a long, long way to winning trophies, because a lot of the time, the quick bikes can beat themselves. If you can just get the bike down the racetrack, which I think is what Steve Badcock is planning to do this weekend, you can take home a lot of points. You know, it's a sensational motorcycle when the burnout goes way, way past the start line and you need a crew member to push it back. I'll tell you what, you'll get fit doing that very, very quickly as well. Gavin Spann just goes along for the ride, says, that was nice, thank you very much. I'll just go on a leisurely 200 mile per hour ride about now. And Steve Badcock, very different procedure as far as this bike is concerned to the others with the burnout and things like that. Doesn't go across the start line, spends plenty of time lining himself up to get this bike down the racetrack. You can even see the crew actually pick the bike up and angle it straight to make sure that it is absolute dead centre pointed at the finish line. Oh, problems for Badcock. I mentioned his consistency, and I think I've just put the commentator's curse on him. Oh, it's the second time this weekend I've done that, but Gavin Spann, a very nice run, bounces back from his problems in the B final last night, and that's a solid run. A 7.06 is on the boards. He did roll out of the throttle a little bit early again, I think because he got close to that centre line. It's been a bit of a theme this weekend for Steve Badcock. I'm not sure what happened there. The bike didn't even get through one revolution of the tyre before it went silent. Didn't spin the tyre, it just went very, very quiet. So I dare say something is broken in that bike. But either way, we have got some storms closing in here at Willowbank. You can see how dark it is. It's about 4 o'clock in the afternoon right now. And I tell you what, it feels a lot more like 6:30. The sun starting to go down here in southeast Queensland. It's a beautiful part of the world. One of the most historic venues that we visit on this tour, the 400Thunder series. And we see this man on screen, our championship leader, looking to bounce back from what was a torrid day yesterday for him.
Yeah, no, it wasn't good. We torched ahead in the first run. So after that, I had another motor in the trailer, so I just decided to put that motor together last night and bolted in the bike for tonight.
Well, the good news is he's back. The bad news is that he might not have a chance to gain any ground or much ground back in the points. With this rain closing in, it's going to be very, very surprising if we get through this without any effect by the weather. We've still got this qualifying session left to go, and Mark Drew will be making this run. The Perth Harley-Davidson, a new bullet in that motorcycle. Got a brand spanking new engine. The spare has gone in, and he'll be taking on Damien Muscat, or at least he was scheduled to take on Damien Muscat. It looks like, unfortunately, Damien Muscat will not be fronting for this one and only round of qualifying, so hopefully his problems are not terminal for the weekend. But Mark Drew looking to bounce back from that, well, pretty decent size explosion yesterday. Torched a cylinder head. What can he do here? Well, it's almost a carbon copy for the front half of the run, but he pedals it a couple of times, gets it across the finish line with a 7.19. That's a solid run. It won't get him the #1 qualifying spot. In fact, it should slot him into number 3 in the qualifying list. But Mark Drew, this was a spectacular run, however way you cut it up. Front wheel in the air multiple times, tyre smoking. It wasn't quick, but they always say if you can't be quick, be spectacular. And I think Mark Drew is one of the men that certainly subscribe to that theory as he pulls the bike up around in the braking area. Let's keep an eye on this bike. You'll see it leave the line with the front wheel way up in the air, and it goes up into instant tyre smoke. Front end comes down. He pedals it once, twice, 3 times to try to get that bike hooked up again. And let's go on board and see exactly what life looks like at over 300 kilometres per hour. And I tell you what, you get it to the finish line and that's half the fun. You've got to get this thing stopped And you could even see his backside coming out of the seat there. Quite the ride for Mark Drew. But Chris Matheson will start as number one qualifier. Again, he's making up ground in this points chase.
Yeah, we didn't change much because weather and everything's pretty much the same. So we just went out there and tried to run a number and get in a good spot for the next rounds. But as it's turned out, the heavens have opened and it's all over.
Chris Matheson is right. We are done for today, courtesy of this rain. But the championship has tightened up considerably. Chris Matheson is now only 38 points behind Mark Drew in this championship. It is tightening up, and it promises to be a barnstorming last few rounds of this championship. For all the information about this series, check out the website 400thunder.com.au. My name's Rusty Gregory. We'll see you next time on 400 Thunder.